Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to fish next year. Obviously, I'm going to fish the BPT. That is first and foremost the main priority. But being that I'm qualified for the Bass Pro Tour, I also have the opportunity to sign up for individual MLF Invitational events. Now, I can fish the full series if I want, or I can cherry pick individual tournaments. We actually have first dibs on each event. So I've been going through the schedules, trying to figure out what I may or may not want to fish, and just trying to see how it would all lay out. So I figured, because I've had a bunch of you guys ask me whether I'll be fishing invitationals, I figured I'd kind of walk you through the process, or at least what the dates are, and kind of what my thought process is for each of those bodies of water. And I'd be curious to get your take on it too. Do you think I should fish all 6 invitationals? Do you think I should fish just a couple of them? Or do you think I should not fish any of them and just concentrate on the BPT tour? I'm kind of mixed on it all. Part of me, as a professional tournament angler, would like to fish more tournaments. The other part of me recognizes that the tournaments below the Bass Pro Tour are generally not big income generating tournaments. But having said that, fishing more time on the water generally is a good thing. So let's jump right into this. I'm just going to really walk down the invitational schedule here and kind of point out where the BPT tournaments lay out with respect to them, because that is really ultimately the main driving factor of whether or not I want to fish them. And the first invitational tournament is on Sam Rayburn, February 9th to the 11th. Sam Rayburn is a lake I've been to, I want to say 4 times, roughly the same time of year. I think I've cashed checks in 3 of those 4 events. I like the lake, but I can't sit here and say that I've got a really good feel for it. Generally speaking, the 3 years that I did do well, I kind of just had one spot that provided most of my fish. The year I didn't cash a check was the year the lake came up like 9 feet the week before we were there. And we were fishing flooded bushes. It was just kind of a cluster. I actually did find a spot on day 2 of that event, but my first day was not good at all, and therefore I couldn't make up for it. But the Bass Pro Tour first event is actually the week before that on Toledo Bend, which is, depending where you're staying on the lakes, probably less than an hour apart. And that would make some sense for me to try to jump into the Sam Rayburn event. If I'm driving all the way to Texas, I can fish 2 tournaments back to back, basically, is what that would be. Never fished Toledo Bend, but I think it would also probably give me a good idea as to what's going on Rayburn, because Rayburn at that time will be off limits. So there is definitely some thought regarding fishing that event. I hate driving during the winter, because once I hit generally the middle part of the country, you can run into ice storms, you can run into snowstorms. So I prefer to really, curtail any of the driving that's unnecessary during that time. But to be able to fish 2 tournaments on one drive to Texas really kind of would help cut costs. So we'll see. That could be one that I definitely am somewhat interested in fishing. After Rayburn, the invitationals go to West Point Lake, which is over in, I think it's the Georgia, South Carolina border. I don't have it up, but I know it's over there. I've never been to West Point Lake. I want to say it'll probably set up pretty similar to a lot of those other blueback herring lakes over there. Lots of shallow bars, a little bit like Hartwell, a little bit like last year we were at Clark's Hill. Had good tournament there, basically same time of year, March 1st through the 3rd. Very much going to be a pre-spawn event, most likely. And I like that more so because the week before, we'd be at Santee Cooper in South Carolina. So the BPT tournament is from February 20th through February 25th. And then the following week would be practice in the tournament for West Point, which I'm sure would be, only a handful of hours away. So again, driving all the way down to that southeast corner of the country, get to fish 2 tournaments during the winter months. So that kind of, is interesting to me. Not that I have any experience on West Point, but it would be the type of thing where I could get new experience on a new body of water. And, I tend to have pretty good success on those lakes in that region. So I would be okay with that. So then the invitationals have about, I'm going to say it's almost 6 weeks off, it looks like. And during that big uh, span for the invitationals that they've got off, I'm going to have the Red Crest event on Lay Lake, which will be starting March 14th. So that would be almost, that'd be about a week and a half after West Point. So I'd have a little bit of time after West Point to regroup and get ready for Red Crest. Actually, it would probably be a week because March 14th is when the tournament starts. So we'd have practice before that. So I'd probably have about a week turnaround, which isn't all that much when you consider you got to drive home and I got to drive back down to Alabama. And then after Red Crest, there looks like there's a couple weeks off. And then the BPT goes to Dale Hollow in Tennessee, which is one that I'm really looking forward to, even though I don't really have much experience at all on Dale Hollow. But I think that will be a fun event. And then the week, well, I guess it would be, so that's, yeah, starts April 9th and then goes, that's basically the week before the Kentucky Lake Invitational. So the third invitational is Kentucky Lake, April 19th through the 21st. So it would be basically on my way home. I drive to Dale Hollow, finish Dale Hollow, pick up, drive over for the start of practice over on Kentucky Lake, which is a few hours away. Makes sense, except for the fact that I'm really not a big fan of Kentucky Lake. I've had a lot of mixed results there. Can't say I've ever fished it in April, so I do think that would be potentially a spawning smallmouth, pre-spawn staging largemouth event, which I think I would enjoy. I have fished Kentucky Lake in March before, middle of March, and it was a phenomenal smallmouth fishery at that time. But I don't know that I could necessarily rely on what I found in March because in April, I think a lot of those fish are probably going to be spawning versus pre-spawn. Regardless, it could be an interesting event. Kentucky Lake, people are saying, is coming back. Uh, it's just one that every time I see on the schedule, I just am never a huge fan of Kentucky Lake for whatever reason. It's also a body of water that if you get a north or a south wind, it can be absolutely brutal out there because it just runs, it's 120 miles long and it's basically straight north-south. So after Kentucky Lake, the invitationals go to Lake Eufaula in Alabama, May 10th through the 12th. The week before that, I would be fishing Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma. So that one would be a little bit of a drive to get from Oklahoma over to Eufaula in Alabama. So you'd probably be looking at a pretty hefty drive for that one. Not crazy, but I'm guessing it's probably about 8 hours. So depending on how you did in Oklahoma, you might have some issues potentially with practice like Eufaula in Alabama. But again, it is back to back, not necessarily like right on the way or in the same area. And Eufaula in Alabama, I've been there a handful of times. Can't say I'm a huge fan of that lake either. You know, it sets up pretty well, but it tends to fish pretty crowded. It is a very good fishery. Again, I've got mixed results there, but it's not one I see on the schedule that really excites me, I guess you could say. So then after Lake Eufaula in Alabama, the invitationals have about a month off and they go to Lake Champlain, June 15th through the 17th. Well, that's an event that I would really like to fish. That's going to be a straight smallmouth spawning tournament. There's going to be largemouth that come into play as well, being that a lot of times you're fishing for male smallmouth, so they tend to run smaller, and a big largemouth really can carry you a long distance. But I've got a lot of experience on Champlain. The old FLW Tour used to generally end the season there every other year or every third year. So I've been there a bunch of times at roughly this time of year. And, you know, this, not to sound cocky, but if there's ever a tournament that I feel like is almost a guaranteed check for me, that would be the one that I would say is one where I really feel like I can cash a good check there. The week, what would it be? The week before that is the Chowan River in North Carolina. So that one would be back to back, which is nice, but it's also not extremely close. Again, I'm going to say that's probably still another at least 8-hour drive. So it's not necessarily in the same exact area, but it is pretty good in terms of being right there. I think there would be a day or two potentially off between the end of the BPT event and when Champlain practice started, so that also elongates it. I don't like kind of just wasting days, if you want to put it that way. But that is a tournament that I'd really like to fish. And then after the Champlain event, uh, we would have the Detroit River on the schedule, and that's July 26th through the 28th. Again, that's a tournament that, I would enjoy to fish, Detroit River. So you'd be able to fish Lake Erie. You could go north into Lake St. Clair. In either case, that would be a fun one to fish. End of July. The one thing I don't necessarily like about that is the James River event that I have for the BPT is not necessarily back to back with that. We've got about a week off between the James River and the Detroit River. So I would drive out to the James River, and then I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably just drive home and then drive back to the Detroit River, which isn't that terrible. That's probably about an 8-hour drive for me from my house. So, in terms of having a close one following getting home for a week, it's definitely doable. At that point, though, one of the other potential issues would be, okay, after Detroit River, which ends July 28th, I then have about another, I'm going to say 4 or 5 day lapse before I'd have to go to the St. Lawrence River. So would I come home for a few days and then drive all the way back? Or would I just, end up finding a place to hang out and fish for 4 or 5 days? But that would then mean I'm on the road for about 3 weeks straight in that event. So having said that, I really don't know what I'm going to do. We definitely have some time. I do want to wait to see what the potential rule changes, or maybe they're going to change payouts, or there's be a championship for the invitationals. I really enjoyed fishing them this year. I had a good season with 5 top 21s, and then the worst one I had all year was a 62nd at the Potomac River. So it was a good year for me. I tend to like this schedule. I'm not going to sit here and say it's like my perfect schedule by any means, but I do think it would set up pretty good for my strong suits. I don't feel like it's necessarily going to be a tournament schedule that is dominated by forward-facing sonar. I think there are some events like Champlain, like the Detroit River, potentially Rayburn, but I think in Kentucky Lake maybe too that it will be a major player, the forward-facing sonar. But I do think with most of these fisheries, you're going to be able to fish how you'd like and not necessarily have to use it. At least you got 2 smallmouth events, so maybe that in that case. But yeah, I don't know. I could definitely see myself jumping into a bunch of these. I don't know that I would want to fish the full 6 tournaments. Maybe potentially I sign up for all 6, and if I don't end up showing up, I lose my $1,000 deposit. Don't really like doing that, but it would be a way to get me a spot for all 6 events if I wanted to. The other thing to keep in mind is it is my first year in the BPT tour, so if I end up having a rough year and dropping into the bottom where they go to their average. So if you're in the bottom 15 out of 80 guys, you revert back to your like 5-year average. And in my case, I'd only have 1 year under my belt. So potentially I fish the invitationals to give me another shot at qualifying if I have a bad year on BPT. I don't think that's necessarily a good way to look at it, but it definitely is another potential option. Yeah, so I'm kind of mixed. I'd love to know from you guys what you think I should do. Right now, I think I'm leaning towards trying to fish a couple of these, just based on the way that the schedules lay out. Like, I do think that there's some benefit in doing that in terms of saving on some travel expenses, and just being able to fish more tournaments on lakes that I'm somewhat comfortable on. So I don't know yet, guys. We've got I'm going to say we probably have about 2 months before we have to sign up for the invitationals. So I'm going to wait a little bit just to hear if there are some rule changes. Maybe there's some payout structure changes. Maybe there's some additional opportunities that are added to the invitationals. I have heard some rumors that they're going to sweeten the pot up a little bit, but that's what I'm looking at. There is also potential opportunity that I might want to jump in some of the Bass Opens. I've heard, there's no way I'm doing all 9, but I have heard there's rumor that they'll be coming to La Crosse this year on the Mississippi River, and as we know, I've got a pretty good track record there, and I just love to fish that place. So depending on what that division is, I could potentially fish 3 tournaments And I think if I fish all three and I were able to win one, I could get a shot at the Bassmaster Classic that way. So I am still curious as to what that schedule is. I'm not a big fan of the Bass Open payouts, but it is one of those things where, if they happen to have a division where I get to fish three lakes and maybe they're all in my neck of the woods that I feel comfortable on, that is something that I could potentially see myself doing. So at this point, BPT, main priority. Obviously, that's the main priority. And, that's what I'm looking forward to the most. It's just a question of whether I want to supplement that tournament schedule with a few extra events. So we'll see. We've got a few weeks. I'd like to know what you guys think. Should I fish more? Should I fish less? What tournaments do you think I'd do well in? Throw your thoughts up in the comment section. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I appreciate all of your support. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.